Hello, in this video we're going to start lining the van with carpet in preparation for the cladding. When converting a van, it becomes very apparent very quickly that you cannot clad off all of the areas within the van to hide the insulation. And so that's where carpet comes in. This up here is a three-way stretch carpet. And so in areas like this, where there's these weird curves going on, we're going to line areas like this with the carpet so that one side of it will be tucked under this bit of gasket trim, whatever that thing is. And then the other side of the carpet will come out here, probably finish around here somewhere, and will be covered once we get the solid boards in. So I'm going to start with simple areas like this and gradually work up to more complex things like that. So what I'm going to do is undo these bolts here, take the thing off, put a bit of carpet behind here, sort of overlapping like this. And then later, when the cladding's attached, we'll basically just box off this area. So this will effectively be recessed into the cladding, but we'll have a really nice background behind it rather than this horrible foil stuff. The same goes for this handle here. You can't clad up to it. And so this is going to be a little bit more tricky because I'm going to need to get some sort of support behind it, then carpet that, and then box it off with the cladding. And again, this handle will then be recessed, but there'll be a really nice background behind it surrounded by the cladding. So already I'm looking at this lock and realizing that not only does this area need to be carpeted, but the back of the door does as well. And so I might as well do all of this in one hit. Now, before we get stuck in with this, let me just disclose that there was a slight oversight with my process. This is a representation of one of the back doors of the van, and the current plan is to carpet the curved edge and then clad over the flat face with the cladding. I'm going to be using hollow soffit PVC cladding for this, and the plan was to just glue it in place. The problem is, behind this PVC is a vapor barrier, and that is simply spray adhesived onto the insulation and the door behind. And so by adhering the cladding to the vapor barrier, that bond is only as strong as the spray adhesive that is holding the vapor barrier to the door, and there's a high chance of it becoming loose over time. And so in this case, what I would need is some sort of mechanical fixing that goes through the PVC and into the metal door behind the vapor barrier. The problem I have with this is that it shows the fixing points on the front of the PVC, and I don't think I can get it looking good, even with screw caps or whatever other solutions there might be. And so my plan is to attach battens to the door first, put plenty of screws in to ensure that there's some sort of mechanical advantage there, and then those battens will give me a solid fixed surface that I can then adhere the cladding onto. However, what this has now left me with is an exposed wooden edge. And so, long story short, what I should have done here is do the battening first and then do the carpeting, or at least in the process that I'm planning here. We'll be covering the battening in the next video, and so if you want to do this method yourself, make sure to carry out that step before doing this carpeting. When doing the outsides of the doors, as you can see, I opted to cut long strips of carpet rather than do it in one full sheet. This was a slightly more economical way of doing it because your carpet would go further, but if I were to do this again, I would have just bit the bullet and carpeted the entire door because it would have made the process much easier, and if anything, it's just an extra bit of sound deadening. And don't worry, I did go back and clean that area up later. Now we're going to do a slightly different process for the remaining three edges of the doors, and I'll cover that later, because next I'm going to start doing the inside of the van around the back doors. Now I did have one realisation with this, in that the vapor barrier around the back doors was very crunchy sounding. And so what I did was got some of my leftover acoustic foam from a previous process and stuck that around the inside columns. This would not only get rid of that crunchy sound, but it would also just give a nice padded spongy edge to this otherwise hard metal surface that I'm bound to ding my head on at some point. And so with the back of the van done, next I could move to the front. Alright, I've somehow got to do this area next. Not sure how much you'll see on camera. This is going to be tricky. How are you meant to do this? This is nuts. Now in this video, I'm happy to explain the overall process and approach I took when installing this carpet, but in terms of technique, this isn't the one for you. It's quite forgiving, so don't worry too much about that, but there are cases where lack of access and working overhead and all that, it can be quite tricky. This is mental. So there's lots of great videos online explaining decent techniques you can use when doing this, but in my experience, you just have to go for it. Fortunately, with this spray adhesive, you can peel it back quite easily and reposition it if you want, but yeah, don't expect this to be a straightforward process. All right. So that is all done. It looks pretty good. all the way round. Now there's a few dodgy bits down the bottom here, but you may remember I'm going to be having a shelf going all the way along here. And so any areas like this should be hidden once the shelf rests on this bracket. And I might even carpet the bottom, I'm not too sure. These wires and things like that will need to go in some sort of conduit thing, but that is pretty good for now. I am liking the look of it. So next I'm going to begin working on these windows in the bedroom area. I've been thinking about this for a while and I don't like the look of these cream frames. They just look a bit dated, I think. Is that the word? Either way, I don't like them. I want to cover these up with the carpet as well. Initially, I was just going to cover the entire thing of carpet and then cut out the area inside. But the issue is, it'd be very difficult to cut the carpet to size in here without slashing through this bug screen. And so what I'm going to do instead is just make 4 strips and fit them independently around the outside of the frame while having a flush straight edge against the inside here that won't require cutting to size. It'll make it a little trickier to execute, but better than cutting through this. I'm scared about this. Don't spray the screen. Oh, I sprayed the screen. Oh, bugger. Shit. Goes off sideways if you don't unclog it. No. Oh, you knob. Okay, I think that's come off. Right. Clean the bloody nozzle, you idiot. I appreciate this is a little bit of a weird technique and I'm sure many of you will have much to say about it, but it did actually end up working quite well. The carpet is ever so slightly folded over the backside of the frame, not so much to intrude on the mechanism, but just enough to provide a decent finished edge on there. But realistically, once it's clad later on, hardly any of this carpet will be seen anyway. So now the only straightforward bit we need to do is this column next to the side door before moving on to slightly more complicated processes that I'll explain in a second. Alright, so the majority of the carpet is in, it's all tucked behind the gaskets and the seals and everything like that. However, there's a few locations where this is not possible, namely on the back doors and the side, all of the doors effectively. The carpet just kind of comes to an end, there's nothing to finish it off and it looks a little bit untidy to my critical eye. So around all of this there is going to be the cladding and it's going to come right up to the edge of the door, so when it closes it meets with this edge. But around here I've got some of this U trim that I'm going to use, and so I'm going to stick that all along here. That'll finish it off really nicely and then we'll just clad around it. It took a little bit of searching, but I'm going to be using this to adhere it. It's quite possibly the worst, most inconspicuous packaging ever, but if we look on the back, it says it's for EPDM detailing, adhesion and repairs. So I think this is the right stuff. It did also say that it will adhere to metal as well, so let's give it a go. So the first thing I did here was get some sandpaper and rough up one side of the U-trim just to give it a little bit of extra adhesion. And then it was cut slightly over length and stuck in position. Now, one of the issues I had with this is that the U-trim had a natural curve to it that I needed to straighten out in most situations, and there was nothing really holding it straight other than the glue itself. And so what I would find is I would stick it in position, come back 5 minutes later, and even if I've tried to tape it down or something like that, it's kind of curved away from where I want it. And not only that, it smeared the black adhesive as well. So it ended up being quite a messy and really fiddly process. Would I necessarily recommend doing it? It's up to you, I don't know, but I can say that the end result looked pretty good, but honestly this took a day or so just to get this trim in position because of those difficulties. So in these close-up shots you can really see the sort of mess that this process has created, but I wasn't too worried about it because I already had overspray from installing the vapor barrier, and so these exposed paint edges needed to be cleaned up and possibly even repainted anyway. Alright, and so with that, the carpeting is done. The jury is still out as to whether the trim around the edge is worth it because that was so much effort to get in place, but there are obviously a few kind of loose ends and frilliness around the edges of the carpet that I'm hoping will be covered by the cladding, but we'll see later on. Overall, I'm very happy with the result as it is, so I really hope it was helpful for you to see the process. Be sure to stick around to see what the finished result looks like, because in the next video, we're going to begin the stud work and then the cladding. I'll see you then.